Joining us from our Denver Bureau, Mimi Wesson, a law professor at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And also from Denver, Daniel Recht, a criminal defense attorney and the immediate past president of the Colorado Criminal Defense Bar. Let us begin at the end of the trial with the closing arguments. In particular, people seem to be focusing on Michael Tiger's emotional conclusion when he walked over to Terry Nichols, put his hand on his shoulder and said, "This is my brother." And to the jury, he said, "He is in your hands." Ms. Wesson, your thoughts? Was that working?
You know, I'm probably just a cynical old ex-prosecutor, but I didn't find that moment as moving as many people did. He had preceded that moment by telling an anecdote, Michael Tiger, about how 30 years ago he'd gone to Washington, D.C. for the first time. And he said the first public building that he saw there was the Supreme Court building with its inscription, "Equal Justice Before Law." And old cynic that I am, I found myself thinking, really? Like, he closed his eyes as he was driven through the town and just opened them when he saw the Supreme Court building? So while I was still thinking that probably unworthy and cynical thought, he walked over behind his client, put his hands on his shoulders and said, "This man is my brother." I wasn't as taken with that moment as many others were.
So a little over the top. Mr. Recht, what did you think of closing arguments?
Well, let's stick with that very topic. I thought it, frankly, was very effective. And I particularly if you accept that many of these jurors trusted Michael Tiger. They looked to him as the person that was giving the answers in the courtroom. And then Michael Tiger showed them that he trusted his client, and the idea is if they trust him and he trusts the client, maybe they, the jury, will trust the client as well.
Mr. Recht, take a look at the prosecution case from a defense attorney's eyes. There are strong points?
I think that I have to say, in the closing arguments, they did a very good job of taking these hundreds of little pieces of a complicated jigsaw puzzle and putting them together one by one until Beth Wilkinson painted the picture she wanted of Nichols being this conspirator. So it was a very good closing.
Well, it seems that so many people are pointing out this fact. They have not yet established, or they have not been able to establish, a motive for Terry Nichols. Is that a weak point?
I think it is. I mean, you know, Tiger made a point of saying there's nobody that will say, nobody the whole trial that ever got on the witness stand and said that Nichols was rabid about the Waco thing. Nobody. Now, people said that about McVeigh, but nobody said it about Nichols. So they tried to make much of that.
Ms. Wesson, Jeffrey Toobin, our legal analyst, made much of the fact that there really wasn't that smoking gun, that single piece of evidence that you could point to, that the prosecutors were having to piece together a lot of bits of evidence. Do you think that that's enough?
Smoking gun, a single piece of evidence that all by itself would convince the jury of the defendant's guilt is not the case. I think the strength of the government's case here was that it didn't rest on one or two or five pieces of evidence, but that it was an interlocking series of pieces of evidence, each of which reinforced the others around it.
Do you think the bad aroma around Michael Fortier is a problem for them?
I don't think it's that big a problem because the significant parts of his testimony were corroborated by other evidence.
Now, from a prosecutor's point of view, look at the defense case. Their strong points?
I think the defense strong points consisted of the defense attacks on two prosecution points that, curiously, the prosecutors need not have made. One is the prosecution's insistence that Nichols was present at Geary Lake State Park the day before the bombing to assemble the bomb. I don't think they proved that beyond a reasonable doubt. I think Mr. Tiger and Mr. Woods were right about that. And second, the prosecution's insistence that there were no other participants in the conspiracy other than McVeigh and Nichols. I myself believe there were other participants, but it's quite right that neither of those things really matters.
See, I don't understand that from a layman's point of view. What is the big argument? Whether there were other conspirators or not seems to me to be an issue for another day. The question is whether Terry Nichols was involved.
I think you're quite right, but the prosecution devoted so much energy to refuting every suggestion that there were other participants in the conspiracy that I think the jurors may well have gotten the idea that it is important, and that if somehow they come to believe there were other participants, that must take away from Terry Nichols' responsibility.
Mr. Recht, am I missing something? Was it just a mistake to put Mara Faye Nichols on the stand and have her tear away at the alibi of her husband?
Well, I'm not so sure she hurt them from the alibi perspective so much. They seemed to clear that up in the closing. But I think they thought she was going to be an emotional splash for them, and she clearly was not that. So it seems as though just from an emotional perspective, she hurt the defense.
Certainly Terry Nichols had lied to the FBI about his whereabouts, his dealings with McVeigh, and that's a problem for the defense to have to work out, I think.
Absolutely. And, you know, when Tiger talked about these things, he tried to divert it and talk about all of the problems with the prosecution case, and that the jury needed to look at this from the viewpoint of presuming somebody innocent and not this from the viewpoint of a sinister motives. But in fact, there were the problems that you point out.
Now, Mr. Recht, from the O.J. Simpson case forward, it seems that there are some headlines that are helpful to the defense, and that is that the FBI has got some real problems in the lab, and those problems are precisely the ones that Michael Tiger kept pointing to again and again. Do you think he scored some points with the jury?
I think he did. You know, it wasn't just the lab that he complained about. Michael Tiger said that the FBI builds witnesses, that they create witnesses, that they falsify witnesses. That's what he was trying to point out, and he seemingly did a good job about it. I think that, you know, the FBI is vulnerable, as you've suggested, and he made a lot of hay in that regard.
Just 30 seconds, Ms. Wesson. The judge gave the jury the opportunity in their deliberations to step back from first-degree murder to consider second-degree murder, and that is at least a possibility, isn't it?
I don't think it's really a logical possibility. I don't see anything in the government's case that suggests that if this was a conspiracy, that the murder of the 168 who died was anything other than premeditated and intentional. But it may give the jurors an opportunity to sort of split the difference and return a verdict that represents some feeling they have that this defendant was not as guilty as Tim McVeigh.
Mimi Wesson and Daniel Recht, I thank you both for a good conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.